Welcome, everybody, to the Wine Tech Insiders podcast, episode 9. We are back. We are talking about the digital London Wine Fair, the first major digital wine event. Jonathan from Bottlebooks was heavily involved. Laurie from Oushinery was there. Nick from Wine Owners was there. And Seb from Troly was not. But let's introduce our panelists. Seb.
Good morning.
Jonathan.
And good evening.
Laurie.
Good morning as well.
And Nick.
Good afternoon.
So we're going to digest the
Just
London
to be different.
Wine Fair. has to be different.
So hang on, just before you start, right? We want to talk about the London Wine Fair. I wasn't there. I wasn't able to attend for different reasons. Can someone just give me a summary, a 1-minute summary of what was the whole thing like? Right, digital. We're not connecting with people the same. We're not shaking hands. How was the feeling? Bottlebooks, how did you go about sort of talking to different wineries and talking to different providers? How is the whole thing shaping up?
Well, what it consisted of was, on one hand, a directory where you were able to search and find and discover the products and the brands and the exhibitors that were participating and see videos, look through their photo books, and request wines. On that side, also the requesting wines was interesting. There were 2 ways of requesting wines. The exhibitors could either have their wines rebottled into 50 ml bottles, samples, and you could get an exhibitor sampler pack where you get a box of 3 to 9 wines from that exhibitor to explore the top, whatever they're wanting to display. And the other one was that you could also request individual samples as well. So you could go through and say, I'm interested in this wine or this wine, and send a request. And so directory and samples was one part of it. And then the other part of it was the interaction. Having a matchmaking component where you could say, I'm offering this, I want to buy this, as well as content. I think that's something that also London Wine Fair has been known for years, is that they've always had a strong content schedule, and they continued that this year. So it's not just one thing, but it is actually a combination of 3 or 4 different aspects for people to explore and connect.
And with regards to connecting with people, so I can think of Laurie Oushinery. You're effectively helping wineries with the quality of their product images.
Yeah.
Did you drive a virtual stand and you were just standing there in a room by yourself and people would walk in? How did that work?
So not exactly. So as Jonathan mentioned, like we had a sort of virtual booth, if you will. So it's almost like, think of it as a mini landing page hosted by Bottlebooks. And this is where people could have a sense of like what we offer. Like we had a page, a PDF per product, like, oh, you can do bottle shots, we can do lifestyle images. But I think for us, like the most interesting component, like the most interactive, if you will, have been the using of the Breya platform, which is the part where you connect and talk with people. Think of it as like mini Zoom professional dating, if you will. Like it's just really like a calendar, really matches easily like a time, and then you just open like a video call. And it's been really, really fun. I'm in Vancouver, so quite a bit of a time difference with the UK. So like my first meetings were like 6:30 in the morning, which offers its own challenges, but also it was a wonderful icebreaker. Like, I was telling people like, hey, I'm having breakfast with you today. I hope that's okay. It's like, oh my goodness, absolutely. I got to talk to people in Greece, Stockholm, reminiscing of my days when I used to live in Stockholm, and just like really, I was impressed how easy like the introduction small talk, that is typical of like the, a fair environment kind of happened, but in a way, in a higher quality, because you kind of chose the people you wanted to talk to because you had a mini bio and profile versus, I don't know, usually my go-to, traditional fair is like, oh, this person is wearing a cool outfit. Let me talk to that person. I know nothing, right, about that person. So this one, it feels like I had a mini pre-screen while at the same time keeping it open. One thing I did as well, so as David mentioned, we had the Future Fantastic panel event on Monday, Monday afternoon for the UK, very early here for Vancouver. I went through the chat, like people that interacted during the conversation during the panel, and I requested like, follow up and talk, like little Zoom interaction. I know they're not using Zoom, but like for lack of a better term, it was really interesting to kind of like follow up a bit deeper with those people as well, because I knew them, like I knew what they were, with they interacted. I thought it was being super data analytic, like it was still like a lot of data that I never had before in any other trade event.
Yeah, I mean, it's the beauty of technology, right? We're effectively capable of tracking how many seconds you spoke to someone and what kind of interactions you had with them. 100%. Yeah. Now, Nick, from your perspective, you're working with importers and distributors and warehousing, and do you see that kind of event? I mean, we know now that technology does work to facilitate interactions and business communications. Do you see the virtual as taking over the physical, given scalability and the amount of people that can come together without having to physically travel?
I don't see it as taking over, but I do see a move to a blend. So, our experience was a little bit different at the fair, because at a wine-related fair where everyone's really very focused on product, very focused on connecting source of supply with new distribution relationships, and where a tech platform talking about business improvement, talking about how to drive gross margin, how to drive your bottom line, it's a very different conversation. So we are to a certain extent Cinderella at the ball. But you know what? There are still some people who want to speak to Cinderella, as we know, and not just one, which was lovely. And one of the fascinating things that came out of it, which was a real advance in terms of how I thought about our business and our place in the world and our relationships with Bottlebooks in particular, and potentially people like you as well, Seb, is that I'd always thought of the Wine Hub, which is our retail management system, as being the platform for connecting importers with retailers and retailers with their customers. So sort of multi-channel and sourcing connectivity. Yet I had a number of conversations with producers. Gosh, I mean, the people that you speak to, right? And they came to me not as producers with necessarily needs for a winery system, although I did, of course, talk about you.
Thank you.
I did, of course. But they came to me as stockholders. Yeah. And that was fascinating, because we know that the market, is evolving, like so many other markets are, towards the stockholding model and the low inventory models. And we know that those two models need each other. They need to connect with each other. The stockholders see value in stockholding. They need sales and marketing machines to be able to distribute through more effectively to grow. We'd never really sort of thought in terms of producers as seeing themselves as stockholders, particularly people representing producers with 3 or 4 pallets of stock in London City Bond or wherever it was. And they were fascinated by the idea of being able to expose their stock to low inventory retailers, merchants, that took away the constraint of cash, which is the thing that stops retailers from being able to buy more widely. and essentially injecting their stock into the hub ecosystem, allowing people to pick it up, sell it, and boom, generating a purchase order off the back of it. So they were super excited by that. And that was a real eye-opener for me, and it sort of changed my perspective of our market a bit.
It's look, from our perspective, I think it's clear that the overall supply chain of craft beverages like wine today simply doesn't work, because unless you're producing 50,000 cases and above, it's pretty much really, really hard for smaller producers to push their inventory in different geographies. Now, we know from data that winemaking is also very unscalable. The vast majority, we're talking sort of 80% plus of wineries are in the 1 to 5 to 10,000 cases produced a year. So these guys just don't have enough inventory. They need to hold on to it for the overall transactions to work. Now, let me just spin that the other way around, right? Do you think that ultimately, as this model grows, or it can be for anyone really, but we have an enormous number of producers around the world. We have a imbalance with regards to production, right? So there's an oversupply of wine, generally speaking. It's been like that for a few decades now. We also know that the vast majority of products are being made by a smaller producer, which require to have a connected digital access to channels. Now, as we connect all those producers together, we're going to do London Wine Fair next year, and we're not going to have a few hundreds. We're going to have tens of thousands of producers worth of inventory. Is the technology going to be able to truly help a restaurant truly discover a new wine through tens of thousands of wines? Or are we going to go back to the good old, what's your brand? How much marketing dollars are you spending?
Well, yeah, it's a super interesting question. And I think it goes to the heart of, is it going to be digital or is it going to be physical? So the physical bit will take care, hopefully, assuming we can all do it and rub shoulders next year. And it was lovely to see the football last night with 6,000 people in the stands at the Arsenal game. That was really cool. So yeah, let's assume that we can all go there. So you've got samples from all around the world. You need to taste. It's efficient to taste in one place. It's efficient to network, because actually we're social animals and we need to do that. But now the constraint has been taken away from making a choice as to whether you're going to buy, I don't know, Badger and Mountain from South Africa or a wine from Chile or whatever it may be. You can have it all now. You can have that endless shelf, and you can make that a curated endless shelf as well, because you decide what your franchise looks like. And as long as there is a commitment by the producer to provide enough stock within a geography that makes it reasonably easy to then deliver within a week or two, let's say, because it doesn't have to be next day, then there is no reason why that market cannot connect in a much more dynamic way and at much greater volume. And then the storytelling and the information through the Bottlebooks platform that feeds into the wine distribution and e-commerce engine that feeds all of these e-commerces that engage with all of the consumers determines what gets sold, because it's going to be about storytelling and giving the end consumer in this sort of network of digital shop fronts the choice of deciding what it is that they're going to spend their money on.
And look, I'm an absolute advocate of technology, and to a certain extent, despite all the challenges we face, I actually thank the pandemic for educating everyone that technology is essential. But I still want to bring it back to a 2 Michelin star restaurant operator who's in, say they're in, I don't know, they're in Washington, DC, and they want to discover a new wine. If the digital channel is bringing across, there's not 1 or 2 or 10 Chardonnay. There's actually 350 Chardonnays you have live access to. How do we help that buyer at the other end connect with the right producer when there's so many small producers across the globe, which in a perfect world are all connected and we have access to all of their inventory and what we want to sell for them?
Well, do they connect with the producer, or do they connect with the channel of distribution that wine is being represented through? And then the question is, how do they get to taste these 350 wines so they can make that choice?
And that's not scalable.
Well, I think there's there's different aspects to that too. I mean, I think what we saw with the London Wine Fair, with the sheer scale of, I mean, they shipped 20,000 samples through the fair, and I think that there's a certain aspect of that, and it's not 20,000 individual bottles that went out, but it's but rather the samples, and so you're able to reach a much larger audience with a wider diversity. And yes, you, like Nick said, you can definitely get that scale at a physical event to be able to taste those wines.
Yeah.
But the rest of the year, there's not a reason why. I mean, this is what you can do digitally is definitely a step above of what we were doing before the pandemic, where you really only had the choice of going to a tasting, and so you had to spend half a day driving into town, taste for a couple hours, and another half a day driving back home. And so there's, I think, tying back to some of, I think, our discussion from a few weeks ago, it's people will start to be a bit pickier about which events they actually need to have it done in person, and which ones could be facilitated through remotely to achieve the same goals between the must-have physical events.
And look, it's fascinating because sorry, go for it, Laurie.
Yeah, I was just like, as entrepreneurs, it's just like, maybe there's a business idea here. Like, maybe we should just create like the middle companies, like, like, what if like this sampling facility of something like as a service becomes like part of the process to get wine out, like, it's just, we know that putting wine in this test tube and getting them out to restaurateurs and all of this, but like, what if it's just kind of like as simple as, you put your profile on Troly, and by the way, this is also like the step, and then get all the wine tasting, and then like the distribution, like wine tube and distribution, like, like London Wine Fair took care of that. They did 20,000, and I'm sure I would love to hear some of the stories, because there must be like some good ones. But again, leveraging technology and processes, like, it's just like, is there like soon to be like this, I don't want to say like industry, but like this middle company that just makes it happen in an efficient, standardized way to just make it like, much more like a reality, without reinventing the wheel. Just another business ideas.
I'm digging around because ultimately we deal with small producers. We help them with their multi-channel business, right? So we connect to their e-commerce, we connect to third-party sales platform. We also generate a lot of import-export compliance style documentation. And now what I'm hearing is that the data itself, so if we're capable of aggregating all of those product information into one big database to help the discovery of product, the data might not be enough. We need to also have some sort of a ongoing samples ordering mechanism. And we know, look, commercial samples flow around the world far more easily than an actual purchase. So we can effectively try and facilitate that, but I'm trying to figure out how much are we truly capable of disconnecting the physical versus the virtual. It's because we're still talking about a lot of producers that, unless you've heard of them, unless they have some marketing presence, unless they've had some distribution, some awareness, or unless your uncle went to visit 3 years ago and they still talk about them, it's impossible to discover them. It's interesting. Look, I think there is definitely a physical business happening in parallel. Maybe within certain geographies, right? Maybe it's going to be Europe altogether, and North America altogether with some impulse. Australia, there's Asia coming up as well. It's fascinating. And look, how do you think, Laurie, from your point of view, you're effectively helping tremendously on the brand and the imaging and the consistency of what's being pushed out. How do you think that role becomes absolutely crucial for one Chardonnay producer to differentiate themselves from the other 200?
It's very interesting because like hopefully at one point the quality of this asset would be like such a high level, like the Oushinery standard or whatever, like the standard that you want to be, that the bottle shop on its own, the quality of it like won't be enough to just like stand out from like a mixed bag of like missing images or like crappy images. Like I think for us, like when we reach that level where really like the quality of the image is not impacting in any way, shape, or form like your immediate perception of the product, may it be wrong or right, that would be first a great problem. I think then it's all about brand recognition and legibility. Like it's just like again and again, I'm amazed how sometimes wineries don't realize that their packaging, their branding is their biggest like advertisement, and so. Oushinery is not a design agency studio. Like we're not responsible for like the branding and the look of the label. I'm not going to give name, but sometimes we get labels sent our way to create like 3D renders, and it's just like, oh man, like it's not a great packaging to start with, like it's just like, but so I think for us it's just like really kind of like increasing like this legibility and recognition, and kind of like adding hopefully soon like a bigger level of like, I call it right now for lack of a better term, like the visual interactivity, like being able to offer a solution where you can zoom in and read that back label or spin the bottle, like just kind of again like as much as possible like give like a more complete representation of the physical product in the digital world. Really going beyond like the standard bottle shot that way. But I really, again, like a bottle shot is not something that break it or make it, but like it's something that if you don't have it right, like the visual representation of your product, it's impacting you in ways that it shouldn't really. So it's just really like putting your best foot forward. Visual impressions matter.
You talked about this on Monday at Future Fantastic. What did you say, like the amount of the buying decision that was like, what the role of the appearance was on the buying decision?
Yeah, so like the human brain, like we make snap decision like 50 milliseconds. That's what it takes from our eye, signal to our brain to kind of like make a judgment on what it is we see. That's just evolutionary. Let me just like look back. Like I was looking at a study by Airbnb that they had more means to do like a bigger study, and what they were saying is that I'm trying to find back my numbers. Oh, here.
It's clear we're influenced tremendously by factors which we completely underestimate, right?
Exactly.
100%.
So I just wanted to share like this study from Airbnb, which obviously is a bit different. They're like listing, but visual representation matters incredibly. Like it's a platform that sells nights in on night. So out of over 100,000 global listings, so like a quite big sample data set, listing with professional photography earn 40% more, get booked 24% more often, and typically can charge 26% higher nightly price. The only change, nothing on the listing changed beyond having quality photography. And like when I say photography, it's also like the styling of the apartment, right? Like the photographers will make sure that the light hit properly, that the things are put in place, maybe there's fresh flower, like there's like the photo itself and like the styling of the photo and the expertise. But like their motto is like it pays for itself, like it's the same listing, like you have the same technically like opportunity, but by having a terrific representation of it, you get all of this. It's just mind-boggling to me. And I think that's what Oushinery is on a mission for the wine industry, to just raise that bar. And that just get me excited.
Look, it's interesting because as I was saying, I'm going to bring it back to my 150 producers of a Chardonnay. And each of them are struggling with marketing. Each of them are struggling with product placement in different channels. Each of them are struggling with trying to understand their business because they're focused on running it, making the wine and enjoying it, right? And I think we have a responsibility to surfacing this kind of information to kind of say, well, you know what, your product image is really good. Maybe you should raise your price, right? To kind of a balance demand versus the offer. Because ultimately right now we're dealing with 100 Chardonnay at between 15 and 20 bucks. They're all readily available, and some of them will have a shit bottle shot, right? Excuse my French.
You know, yeah. It's so funny. It reminds me. So I was, and I've been a designer for the wine industry, and sometimes, I design these labels, which, sometimes like require like a bit like fancy finishes, like extra gold foil or embossing, and it's an extra plate, and I don't know, maybe it's like this particular thing that just makes the label stand out, maybe cost, $500, $600 more to produce, especially on the first year. And sometimes I would just look at the client, just like, what if you raise by 30 cents your bottle? And like some more, like what if you just kind of like change like the mindset around it? And it's just like, people will, they want to, like it may not impact, you can recoup your original investment and then some, because then it's a one-time purchase beginning when you get the printing process going, and then year after year after year, like this expense is already taken care of, but you don't have to lower your 30 cents that you increase to make up for it. Like it's just
David, how are we doing with time? I'm sorry, I just completely hijacked the whole thing. Are we okay with time?
No, it's great. I think
you have 2 more minutes. I have one more question actually. Laurie, you mentioned the gold embossing.
Yeah.
Right. And absolutely,
as an example,
I'm 100% like, I actually read a study coming out of Australia a couple of years ago, and they have numbers of, if you have a wax seal, it's an extra $1.50 on the price of the perceived value of the product. If you have the gold embossing, if you have a paper wrapping, if you have a wooden box, all these things have an impact. Mm-hmm. And in the traditional physical distribution chain, the distributor is going to show up with a bottle and go, look, dude, fucking feel this, right? It's got to be a good wine. How does that translate virtually, right? So Nick, for instance, you've got a number of different retailers who we want to pump inventory into their platform for them to generate the sale. Truly, what is their capability of generating a sale for a product that they might not have tasted and that they've probably never touched, and they really want to work with somehow their target consumer in order to generate a sale? If there's 150 Chardonnay, how does that shape up?
Storytelling. You do it through storytelling, and you have a range of assets, and one of those assets is what the bottle looks like, maybe, yeah. And I don't know, if you're an American producer, really going for the full-on flavor, then you give the bottle shoulder pads, and shoulder pads kind of give a sort of visual representation of weight. But I think that's probably being slightly sort of flippant. I think the main thing is storytelling around the domain, the producer. My favorite producer in Burgundy started up in 1999. Sorry, his grandfather had run the domain. He'd run the domain in a way that was biodynamic. Not that he thought in terms of biodynamism, but he kind of did it according to the phases of the moon. And his father had gone to Colmar and sold his soul to Danone, and he came back, and it took him X number of years to, reclaim the domain, reclaim the soil, get the, macrobiotic activity back into the soil. He's braiding, he's planting with high density,
But then that's storytelling.
Beautiful. I mean, you're excited, right? I mean, maybe you're not excited.
Storytelling. How does it scale?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How does it scale? How do we get the retailer to say, I'm going to put on my online store this one Chardonnay, not that other one, given they've never been there?
Well, you've got to find some way of being able to tag and filter, and that's, you know, that's where that's where a business like Bottlebooks comes in. And tagging and filtering isn't just saying it's Chardonnay and it's 13.5% ABV and it's and whatever. It's filtering by all of the other parameters, and the parameter that the Michelin star restaurant wants to search by isn't the same parameter that a specialist retailer, you know, in, I don't know, in Maida Vale is gonna select by, and it's not going to be the same criteria that your customer who wants an amazing Chardonnay to celebrate his, you know, daughter's 21st birthday wants.
Yeah, look, it's fascinating because we write pretty much a weekly blog article at Troly, and we had one published 2 or 3 weeks ago around how wineries are creating new products for the new generations of consumers, right? You're talking about biodynamic, you're talking about sustainable, you're talking about natural style wines, right? And we've never had as much feedback from wineries, right? We're sending this to about 13,000 wineries on a week-by-week basis. And we've never had as much feedback of wineries saying, you know what, I've been doing this for 10 years. I still can't sell my wine. And that to me is fascinating. We need to figure out a way of connecting.
And I'm not surprised, because I think the inhibitor is cash.
That's the thing, and it's all back to marketing dollars. And what we need to do.
The only way that you can open that up to the whole world is by moving to a model where someone is a lender of working capital in the form of bottles of wine, and other parts of the channel of distribution have therefore the constraint taken away.
Yeah. Oh, we need 100%, 100%. Look, we need data to flow, and we need rich data, I think, to really allow each and every retailer, each and every restaurant to differentiate themselves in the kind of product offering they want to push, right? So a certain channel might be really good with a $10 to $20 kind of a wine. Another channel might be really specialized on sustainable biodynamic. Another channel might be specialized on small production sparkling wine, right? Different retailers will have different kind of offering, and that's where they each become a bit more of a marketing and a sales engine, truly not an inventory management kind of a system, right? Retailers shouldn't have to manage inventory in a world where everything is produced at the rate of a few hundred cases, you know? Oh, look, interesting stuff, interesting. Have you got another hour? I can just keep going. I'm a strong advocate. I think product information. There's a point here that we've raised today, which is samples. What's the value of trying to be able to have samples, even if it's on a once a month or once a fortnight basis, to just poof, flow around the world. Everyone who's ordered a sample on the first of the month, it's being processed, and you're going to get your sample first week of the month. Data needs to flow, and there's a big question mark as to whether we must have samples or whether we can do without.
Or do you actually have to? I think another aspect that I haven't really explored, because COVID has also prevented this as well, is that do you actually have to have the samples delivered to your residence? Because if people are able to get together again, then what about sort of an intermediate level of efficiency, that you don't have thousands of wines together in one room, but you can go to a few places around you and have access to a range of samples, and some of those you might have ordered because you are explicitly interested in those wines, but then you could sample other things while you're at it because somebody else has perhaps requested it and it's available in the tasting tasting room. So I think there's, you know, as we slowly get everybody vaccinated and we're able to sort of return to a normalcy. I mean, we're still sort of at the beginning of this. I think we've really we've really explored one real extreme after being at really a very physical extreme, and now this hybrid. I think has yet to be defined what hybrid is. It's a whole. It's not just one thing. It's probably a range of gray.
Yeah. Oh, look, the balance is going to be hard to strike. 100%. I think there has been, historically speaking, an imbalance, as I was saying, with production and who's stuck in the corner. A lot of small producers are basically making the absolute best stuff and never gets discovered. But at the same time, to actually sort of have some sort of a balance, we need to use technology a bit more, and we cannot go back to the old ways. We just cannot go back to the old ways. We need to have more Chardonnays being promoted or pushed or being known or being advertised or marketed or whichever way. 100%, 100%. Oh, look, fascinating stuff. Fascinating stuff. Sorry, I completely. Did you have any specific topics you wanted to go through today, David? Sorry, I just completely.
That was great. Maybe I'll just finish off here. There are some stats from the London Wine Fair. There was 2,600 visitors attended, 238 virtual stands. The fair was decided on. Hannah from the London Wine Fair decided to go ahead with the digital strategy 4 months ago. So all of this was put together very quickly. There was 3,400 products, 33 different countries. There are 28 panel discussions, 6,000 views on them. There were 9,500 meeting communications and 20,000 samples were sent, as Jonathan just mentioned. You know, the reaction's still coming out from the journalists and industry and people. But I don't know, maybe we could just have a round of the final thoughts on the fair, what you thought overall, and yeah, if there's anything we've missed from, say, Laurie.
All right. So for me, like, I really enjoyed like the efficiency of it and the convenience. Like, you know, I was able to attend the London Digital Wine Fair from Vancouver. Like, there's something still like quite magical about it. Really enjoyed the leveraging of technology, and that was just like very intuitive and just kind of like open up possibilities. And like I mentioned, like this pre-screening so that you can, you know, talk to people that you have a better chance to like give value and get value from. Like, it felt like I wasted less time on like the chit-chatting, which I know typically is like part of the maybe a bit less serendipity. Like that could be maybe like a bit a part of the digital aspect of it. But overall, like I felt like yeah, like great efficiency without being like too rigid as well. Yeah.
Nick, what did you think?
I really thought that the conference program was great. I really liked and appreciated being part of our session yesterday on how to succeed in a digital first post-COVID world. I think was the mouthful that it was described as. And what I found was, I think what we all saw was there's quite a lot of interactivity. So there were a lot of questions flowing back to the panelists, as well as the panelists' discussion as the discussion today in this podcast. And I think, you know, it's a really interesting moment in time for an event like that to be there and be there for the business of selling wine, but also to be there for the purpose of helping those businesses really think through who they are, what they would aspire to be being, and how they can make that journey at a moment in time where technology is significantly more accessible to them than it's ever been before. So I think for me, it definitely worked at that level virtually in a way that was probably more present than a physical fair. So I was excited by that event in particular.
Jonathan, you have the deepest insight into the London Wine Fair, helping them put it all together. What do you think?
Yes, but I think I might actually take a couple steps back. We talk about the wine industry being a very traditional business, and that that many businesses need to invest in digital and start this journey. And what you have at the London Wine Fair is a business that at its core was a very traditional business, physical, in person. It was as traditional as you get in the industry, and they took a big risk and delivered on a very big digital project. And I think that can serve as an inspiration to other businesses that it is possible. It is by no means easy, and you do have to be flexible and have to learn along the way and adapt. And even now, with the fair being over, it is also still the beginning, because now it's looking at what actually worked at the fair, getting the feedback for what people liked, and looking at how the London Wine Fair, the digital London Wine Fair platform, continues and becomes this hybrid platform that that brings everybody back together every May in London.
And Seb, when is the Trolley World Conference?
Oh my God, I've been dreaming about this. Oh my God, look, we're looking at launching an industry user group, right? And it's something that we just don't have the time to actually manage this at the moment, but we really want to try and get everyone together, not just on a world conference, on a day-to-day basis. Anyone who needs help with distribution, anyone who needs help with marketing, with this, we need to connect everyone together as much as possible. So stay tuned. There's going to be something coming up very shortly.
Well, thanks everybody. That was episode 9. We did a big recap of the London Wine Fair, dived into how the industry works behind the scenes and where the future of it might go, how powerful images are, and we talked about the future of order sampling. Thank you so much, Seb from Troly.
See you guys.
Jonathan from Bottlebooks.
Take care.
Laurie from Oushinery.
Bye-bye.
And Nick from Wine Owners.